Hi there, welcome back. This is Madan again. Today we are going to learn how we can add soft delete feature in our MVC application. What I mean by soft delete is whenever we delete a record from our application, usually that record disappear from our database table, or we permanently delete the record from the database table. But in practical situation, it is wise to only mark that record as deleted and not permanently remove that record or the row from the database table, so that in future if we want to bring that record back, then there won't be any hassle or problem for us. So for that I have designed the simple MVC application, and here are not so many things. So we just have a model, employee model, with those properties: ID, first name, last name, age, and this rec status, and a here represents the active. And whenever we create this model, the value is set by default. And we also have a created at property which is set to datetime.now value. And another thing is I have designed a interface called iSoftDelete, but here is nothing, no any method definitions or property definitions, so it is just the blank interface, and we'll be using this interface later on. After that we have our application db context class, and here is I have added one db set of the model employee called employees, and I have also generated the table for this model using entity framework migration, and we can see that table from here. So our database is the name of our database is PROJ, and if we look that table in that database, we can see that. So I'm going to list the table here. So tables, and here is our employees table, describe, and this structure conforms to our model property definition here. After that I have created a controller called employee controller, and here are basic things that we need to create and display data. So index method, this gets all the records whose status is equals to a from the database, and display pass that list to the view. And I have simply created a new method which I can use to generate the scaffolding data. So I have created here 3 employees here and added that to the database. If there are no any records in the table, and finally I have created a delete method, and it gets the employee with this ID and remove that record from the database table. At this moment this method removes the rows from the table permanently, which we can verify by running the application. I guess I have already started the application, so it's up and running. Let's go into the browser and refresh it. Right at the moment I don't have any record here, so if I navigate to the new method, then those employees should be added to the database and we can see them. So I'm gonna go over to the new, and here we go, we have 3 employees added, and we can also verify that from our database table. So let's run the query, select asterisk from employees, and we have 3 employees with rec status A. Now at this moment if I delete the record from our application, let's say this delete, and if we check those in our database, then those records are gone. So now if by some reason in future we want to get those records back, then there is no way. Now what we are going to do is we are just changing, we are going to change only the status of the record as deleted, and not permanently remove that record from the database. So for that, the one thing you can do is while deleting the record, just you can update the status value to something else, let's say D, but there is another approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to override the save changes method from application db context and make that process automatic. So let's move over to the application db context class, and here I'm going to override the method public override in save changes. And first of all, I'm going to get all the entries that are changed during our applications by using the entity framework method. So let's loop over, let's look for each entris entries in change tracker dot entries. So what this does is it gets all the entities that are changed from our application. So whenever we try to save our record or update our record or delete our record, entity framework tracks the state of that record, and we can get those states using these methods, using the change tracker dot entries. And from let's make it to entry, entry. Now I can get the entity off of this entry entry variable. So let's define another variable here, var entity entry dot entity. So if what this does is it gets the individual entity. So if I am working on the employee entity, then I get that employee entity here. After that, I'm gonna check the state of this entry. So if entry dot state equals entity state entity state dot, and we have got here added, deleted, detached, modified, or unchanged. So whenever we add a new record, the state becomes added. Whenever we delete the record, it becomes deleted, and whenever we modify the record, it becomes modified. So if our state of the model is deleted, then what we are gonna do is we are gonna change that state equals entity state dot updated modified. So what this does is, now this doesn't remove our record from the database table in state, it only tries to modify the record. After then, what we do is we get the property rec status of our employee model here, this property, and sets its value to D. So whenever we see any record that has the rec status D, then we remember we can assure that that record is removed from the database, or the simply D indicates that the record has been deleted. We have an entity entity dot, we use the reflection to get that property here, get type dot get property rec status. So this gets the rec status property of this model employee, and then we set the value to this property, and we are going to set the value to this object entity, which will become employee whenever we try to delete the employee. So we can pass entity here, entity, and then we can pass the value, so D. Now finally, this method needs us to return the integer, and then we are going to return base dot save changes. So at this point, if we try to run our application, then we should see the rec status changed in our record in the rows of the database table, rather than permanently removing the record. So the application has started again, and then let's go here. First of all, what I'm gonna do is remove all the record from our employee table. So delete from emplo employees, and then let's refresh the application, and let's add the record. So here we have 3 records, and right at the moment, if we select all the employee, the rec status is A. Now whenever I click on delete, the record has gone from our view. But if we go and check over to our database table, then it has just modified, its status has been modified, but the record is actually there. So if we need those records in future, we can just we can bring them back from here. now. And also I have applied the filter here when selecting the record, so this index method only displays the record whose status are A. Now there may be some cases for some model you want a hard delete, that is you want to remove that model or the record associated with that model from the database table permanently, and for models you want to keep them by just changing the status to D. In such a case, what we can do is we can design or define an interface with nothing in it, and then what we can do is whenever for which model you want to implement the soft delete feature, that is not permanently removing record from the database table, you can just inherit that implement the iSoft delete interface to that model. And then what you can do is go over to the application db context and add another check here, and an entity, this entity here is iSoft delete. This indicates that if this entity implement iSoft delete interface and its state is deleted, then it will modify its state to modified and change its status to D, otherwise it won't. So again, let's run our application. At first I'm going to remove all those records from here, and if we select, we have nothing. And then let's run the application. I'm gonna refresh it, and then let's add a record again. So we have those records, and I delete the record, delete, and let's go over and check it here. So the rec status has changed to D, but the moment you remove this marker interface from here and then try to run the application, first of all I'm going to delete all those records, and we have nothing. So let's run the application, refresh. So let's write all those records here, and we can verify those from our database table as well. And then let's delete. If we go and check for those records, then those records are gone. And if you bring back this interface again here, I soft delete, then rather than hard deleting the rows from the database, it will just only change the status of the record. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.